So I guess it's time for me to share what I've been doing for the past year and a half, I suppose. I've been making these cards. These cards are specifically for storytellers, specifically for coming up with story ideas, especially the meaningful, moving, powerful story ideas. I guess I should talk about why the cards, and there's more than 3, by the way. There's like a whole deck of them. Hold on. I've got a whole deck of them, which I'm eventually going to go and go through each one with each card in a video. But I'm just going to talk about them for a minute. The way in which we tell stories, actually the way in which we come up with stories, is based on, I'll give you a little brief history, is based on the idea of structuralism and Aristotle's ideas. Those are like the 2 main ideas, the 2 main ways of thinking. I guess Aristotle laid the foundation. He basically said that there were different types of stories, or different genres and different categories, you could say, and there are different types of things that can happen in stories that can move people in certain ways. And he also gave names to certain aspects of what you might call elements of a story. So those are the basic things like plot. And then structuralism came along and took the idea of Samoics, formalism, something like that. And they said there's underlying structures to language. What if there are underlying structures to stories? So let's analyze a bunch of stories. Is this still recording? Yeah. Let's analyze a bunch of stories and see if there are patterns. And the original idea was that we could find rules. I don't necessarily agree with that anymore. But they did find patterns. And there's actually been a lot of work. There's also been a lot of work on coming up with terminology to be able to analyze narratives in a methodical, scientific way, which is called narratology. I don't necessarily know how useful that is for writers, but on the flip side, they did find patterns. They analysed a lot of people who subscribed to the structuralist philosophy, went and analysed a lot of stories, a lot of myths, folk tales, and found patterns. And you'll all know Joseph Campbell, The Hero's Journey. His work is based on structuralist philosophy that actually a little bit. His idea was that you can analyse all of these myths and find patterns, and that's exactly what he did. He found this sort of archetypal pattern. I don't know if he claimed that they are the rules to the perfect story, but the structuralist thinking would be that they are the rules, that there would be perfect rules, or there would be underlying structures. That's what the idea of story structures is. Some say that there would be set rules, some say there would be various different types of rules and structures. But regardless of all of that, yes, while there are patterns in stories, which is exactly what these are patterns in stories and in real life, things that happen in real life, especially the ones that move us, like these sorts of things. They can move us, and you see those patterns throughout lots of different people's lives. Everyone has to face some sort of complex task every now and again, or everyone has to face some challenge where they're limited on time, or there's always something brewing underneath the surface, So there's all these cards that represent these patterns, and that's exactly what the patterns outlined in The Hero's Journey would be. But the difference is that in what am I saying? Oh yeah. With a structuralist philosophy, which is what most people subscribe to, because it's just the ideas that have been stuck around, and it's also the ideas which I held at the start of when I was doing my channel, is that you can write the perfect story and that there are perfect structures to stories. Because with the structuralist thinking, if you look at all of these different stories and you find patterns, and these are the patterns in the correct order for the perfect story, and that is to some degree correct. The analogy that I have liked to use for myself over the past year is, if you analyze all of the different types of cakes, you might find one perfect cake with all of these, perfect little aspects to it that make up all of the perfect cakes. And it may be the perfect cake, or it may be the cake that encompasses all of the great things about all different cakes. But the problem is if everyone aspires to make that cake, or if everyone who is a baker makes their cakes aspiring to be like that perfect cake, that archetypal cake that is a montage of all of the cakes, all of the great things about all the cakes together, then you only get one cake and there's nothing else to it. And the problem is that life isn't like that, and the stories we tell about life isn't like that. There might be certain archetypal, you could say, patterns or events or situations that take place in life. They can take place in different orders, I reckon. And there are also logical ways that you might structure how you tell someone a story. For example, you might want to start with a bit of context, a bit of a backstory, so they get the idea of what's going on, even in just conversation about something crazy that happened to you yesterday or something. You might want to give a bit of context. You might want to talk about what you were doing before, and then you might have a main event that you want to get the point across. You might be telling the story for a particular reason. So there is a logical formulaic formula that we use to coherently tell someone a story, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there are rules to the things that can happen in stories. So that's a bit of a background, and my way of thinking about it is, I don't want to give people the perfect story or the perfect structure or the perfect set of patterns for you to then work towards, because then that's a top-down approach of creativity. Is that still recording? Yeah. That's a top-down approach. You're saying, this is the end result, you need to work up to that, and you all end up with the same thing near enough, and creativity goes out the window. So rather than going from the top and trying to come up with all these ideas to fit that perfect structure, instead I wanted to give creative tools from the bottom, where you can create your fictional story from the bottom up. And then once you've got all of those ideas, then you can fit it into some sort of coherent story that you might want to tell to someone. I hope that makes sense, and that's kind of like a little brief intro to what I'm going to be doing, I guess, over the next however long. The goal was to be basically introduce creativity and make it an exploratory process again, rather than an educated, I guess, structured way of, well, I've already said that. Oh, and one more thing, actually. These are just the prototypes, by the way. So they're just printouts, and they're just ways of me to show you the cards, and I'm going to get them professionally done so I can eventually sell them, because I think that there are going to be people out there that are going to find these quite useful. So yeah.